Hi, and welcome to the first Q&A for Lit 11, Literature of the World. So, yesterday we had an oral exam, and some of the students were not able to answer, or they were not called because of the time constraints, and um, also we were not able to have a discussion of all the topics in Module 1 yesterday. So because of that, we're having this Q&A. And thank you to the students whose questions were selected. So thank you for asking good and thought-provoking questions. All right, so I'll try my best to answer the questions. But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to discuss the topics first, and then the Q&A will follow after that. So we already have a basis of the answers, right? Okay, so all right, so what are the guidelines for the Q&A? So as I have said, the students who have not participated in the oral exam for one reason or another are invited to ask questions with regards to the following topics: literary models and literary standards. And then the top 5 questions for each topic are chosen, which I will answer in this video. And please stick around, because after the video I will be posting a quiz on Moodle. Alright, so we will have a quiz on this one. So the students who are chosen will earn points for the oral exam, but I will not give you the same highest possible score as the students who took the actual oral exam, because that is their privilege for taking that opportunity during the Google Meet session. Okay, but of course you will also have good scores for asking thought-provoking questions. All right, so first let's talk about literary models. So the study of literature appeals in different aspects and importance. So hence, there are literary models that we can use when we study a piece of literature. So a literary model is closely related to a literary approach. So a model is a sort of a structure in which we can look at a piece of literature. So the first one is the cultural model, and it believes that literature aims to understand and appreciate cultures and ideologies different from one's own time and space. So it means that literature is a way of understanding people, the culture of people. So that is the basis of cultural model. So this model is of course related to the cultural approach. Okay, so the approach is the style, right? But what's the difference? Model is like it's quite almost the same, no, the model and then the approach, but this one it's more on like the structure of the objective, all right, of what you're going to look for. All right, what's your reason for understanding or analyzing a particular literary text. So you are in it to study the culture, the tradition, the ideologies, the way of thinking of people from a certain let's say country or time and space that is different from your own experience. Okay, so you do that through a piece of literary text, such as a poem maybe, or a novel. What's a novel that's different from my experience? For example, let's say my favorite romantic novel, which is Pride and Prejudice. So that's set in Regency England. So the time was Regency era, all right, and then the place is England. Meanwhile, I'm born in the contemporary times, 21st century, and I'm from the Philippines. So the difference in culture is quite stark, right? So next is the language model. So to study a piece of literature using the language model would be to think that literature aims to promote language development like vocabulary and structure. So, if you're going to teach, let's say, you're going to teach literature using the language model, you will emphasize or give emphasis, among other things, on the vocabulary, the word choices of the author. All right. So a good, shall we say, activity for this one would be, let's say, the author's attitude, the tone of the author, and the choice of words that he has made in order to deliver that kind of tone. All right. What's a good example? Let's say Edgar Allan Poe. All right. Edgar Allan Poe is one of the forerunners of Gothic storytelling, and he's considered as the father of the short story. And yes, in fact, in this course, we're going to read one of his short stories, and we're going to study about the tone and the choice of words, the themes that are found in one of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. All right, so when we would go to that particular topic or text, we're going to use the language model. And have in mind that, it's not just about telling a story. A story is also there to help us develop our language, improve our language. Okay, so with regards to this, as a language teacher, I would highly suggest that when you read a book, a novel, short story, whatever literary piece, take time to write, record those words and expressions, phrases that you find interesting, the words that you have only met while reading that text, and then go find their, search their definitions in the dictionary. And for sure, you will not only learn to appreciate the story, but your vocabulary would also improve after reading this particular story or literary text. So, the last one is personal growth. Sige. So, for personal growth, literature aims to help one achieve lasting pleasure and deep satisfaction in reading. So, when we talk about this kind of model, the thought is that literature is not just about, writing beautiful words. It's not just about reflecting one's culture, but that it also exists for us to be entertained, be happy, be satisfied with, reading. All right. So by reading something, we somehow learn something that helps us become a better person. So that's the point of personal growth. So that's why in teaching literature, teachers also emphasize things or elements such as the theme, all right, such as the characterization, the development of the characters, because it is through these elements, among other elements that are possible, it is through these elements especially that which, readers such as students can see, how people can change and how people can be witty, intelligent, funny. And so we enjoy and we learn and we become better persons through reading a literary piece. All right. So these are the three literary models: personal growth, language model, and cultural model. So these are not only applicable for literary or literature and language teachers, but of course these are applicable to all readers of literature. Okay, but of course as teachers, we have a role to guide our students along, right? So now we're going to proceed to the questions, the question and answer. So the first question is from Clint Gifford Salonoy. So he's asking, what is the relevance of personal development to literature? So I think I've already explained it in terms of personal growth, right? So of course, there's a big relevance of personal development to literature. That's why we have, for example, not just, the fiction and nonfiction types, but specifically nonfiction. We have how-tos, right? Like how to win friends and influence people. I have here with me a book that's also an example of personal development. I have the Daily Stoic. I don't know if it's going to be clear. All right, here you go. The Daily Stoic. This is by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. So it teaches us how to meditate, develop wisdom, persevere, and lead better lives. And so when you study literature, when you teach literature, you should not forget the personal aspect, the human side of literature. Okay? So that's why literature is part of humanities, because you cannot separate the human aspect from a piece of literature, especially because it's written by humans. It's written by humans based on human experience. Okay. So the next question we have from Riza Mabuan. What are the advantages and disadvantages of knowing the types of literary models, and how do they affect the reader's perspectives? So let's take it a question at a time. So the first one is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of knowing the types of literary models? First off, I think there are no disadvantages. I think that you can only win, right? Knowing that there are literary models. If you are, let's say, a literary student like you are literature students, and let's say literature teachers as well, knowing that there are literary models can help us in studying a literary piece. It helps us determine what could be the objective, right? It's about the aim. The models help us determine the aim or aims of a literary piece. Okay, so that's the main advantage there. And other things can spring from that, such as it helps us analyze better. It helps us, see connections that which we may not have seen before. Okay, but is there a positive disadvantage? Well, if we stick only to the three models, then we could be limited. So for sure, there are other models out there, but these are the three most common. But you need to take note that aside from models, we have approaches, and there are also literary theories. So there are many ways of, analyzing a literary piece. Okay? So like I said, you can only win. So the second question is, how do they affect the reader's perspectives? Of course, by determining the aim of a literary piece and analyzing the piece based on what you think is the aim of that piece. All right, it will affect your perspectives. You will if you are expecting, or if you're looking for, let's say, if you read a romantic novel, a romance novel, if you're expecting for romance, if you're expecting for a love story, then of course, if you get it, you will be satisfied, right? So that's how it affects your perspectives. You could feel that you're supported by the author, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes you would disagree with the author because you have different perspectives, and it's a good thing. It means that we are not living in a vacuum, that other people may have different ideas from you. And so it allows you to open your mind. Right? It allows you to open your mind. What could be other ways of thinking, other ways of looking at life, other ways of looking at this particular experience? All right? So that's how literary models can affect readers. Okay? So the next question is, from understanding the nature and difference of literary models, how are you going to instill these knowledge through the ABCs, specifically? All right. Okay. Specifically through the ABC approach. Okay. Now, the ABC, affective, behavioral, and cognitive, it's based on Bloom's taxonomy, right? So, sorry. for me, personally, I don't stick to just this kind of approach. There are many approaches to teaching, okay? But Bloom's being the foundation, Bloom's taxonomy being the foundation of how we develop, our objectives. And ideally, we need to have one objective for each domain, right? Affective domain, cognitive domain, and then there's the psychomotor domain, which is behavioral. All right. So now, how is it related to literary models? How are you going to instill these knowledge through these? Well, you need to think that first. Okay, when you teach a particular literary piece, okay, let's follow the ABC. First, affective. You need to think what could be the level of affect that's going to happen within the student. What would you like the student to appreciate? Appreciation is one of the things that should happen, right, in the affective domain in terms of of literature. So we can start with that. How can the students, you started questions like, how can the students appreciate this literary piece? Okay, so you from that question you can think of a strategy perhaps, and it can also help you choose whether you have the right literary piece or not. Okay, so these types of questions, actually, especially if we're going to consider the domains and the levels of our students, the literary standards will also take in would also have to be considered. So later on we're going to talk about the standards, and I must say that you need to think, you need to choose based on the models and the standards. Okay, so don't just choose any literary piece. Okay, so anyway, going back to affective, right? So yeah, so one very important thing for the affective domain would be appreciation, the valuing. All right, it could be the valuing of a particular, let's say, personality or attitude, or it could be a theme. All right, but yeah, in general we talk about appreciating a literary piece. Okay, behavioral or psychomotor. Okay, um there should be something that the student would be able to exhibit through actions. All right, how are you going to instill these knowledge through, no, I think yeah, so you need to choose in terms of the psychomotor. I think I'm on the right track because the question is quite complicated of the way it is structured. Yeah, so because I'm thinking also of the teaching learning process. Okay, all right, so yeah, so going back to behavioral. So when we talk about behavioral, we're talking about psychomotor domain, right? So if you're going to teach a literary piece, you need to think of what the students should be able to do or create or make, okay, within the teaching learning process that will show that they have understood the literary piece. So one common way is for students to do a role play. Another technique or strategy or activity is a character interview. I love that. One student would pretend that he's the character, and another student would be the journalist, and they would have like a talk show or a news interview, something like that. Okay, so the last one here is the cognitive approach. So cognitive approach is more on the comprehension, the understanding, the analysis of a literary piece. So you can use any model, all right? So all those, not all, but then specifically the cultural and the language models, they are closely related to the cognitive approach. So you can ask the students or let the students do something so that they would be able to showcase that they have understood, they have identified the elements, for example, the characters, the themes, the settings, etc. Okay, so you can also let them compare characters or maybe settings or themes, any of those. So you can make it formalistic. You can use the formalistic approach. You can also use the cultural approach along with the cultural model. All right. So yeah, so you can mix it up, and again, these things will be dictated by, of course, the objectives of the school, the objectives of the particular subject, and the levels of your students, as well as the standards that which you want the students to reach. Okay. I hope that it's clear, and I hope that I've given you enough ideas as to how to go about this in case you will teach literature in the future. Okay, so thanks, Henan. And now we have a question from Cheryl, and it goes like this: how does literature contribute to the huge culture shifts such as fashion trends, new products, social movements, and other societal changes? It contributes a lot. Okay, so one good example of how a piece of literature could change culture is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. So when that novel was released, it was sold out, and a lot of people were able to, especially the French, they were able to reflect on their experience as a French people, and the other countries were able to understand what the French were going through. And in terms of, fashion, products, social movement, etc., the novel, almost 100 years later, or more than 100 years later, was adapted into a musical. And it is one of the, if not the longest running musical in the world. It is one of the longest running musicals in the world, and one of the most produced school musicals in the world. So Les Miserables has gone beyond being a novel. It is now a movie. It has been adapted into a movie several times. It is a musical. A lot of merchandise has been sold. T-shirts, mugs, pens, name it. It's there. And what else? Les Miserables has created careers of a lot of artists around the world. Okay, and one of them is Lea Salonga, who played Eponine in the 10th year anniversary, and what's this? The other character. Oh my God, Eponine, and yeah, she played another character, the one who sang, "I dreamed a dream in time gone by, when hope was high and life worth living." Oh my God, it has escaped my mind. Wait. Yeah, so anyway, so yeah, so Les Miserables has gone beyond being literary, and it has influenced a lot of people. In terms of social changes and movements, the song "Do You Hear the People Sing," which is also called as the People's Song, has been sung in a lot of, people movement or revolutions around the world. Okay, so how does the song go? Do you hear the people singing the song of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart, all right, echoes the beating of the drums, there is a life about to start when tomorrow comes. So it's a very powerful revolutionary song, and it has been sung even in Philippine movements and rallies. Okay. So we have the last question for literary models. How do literary models affect literary texts? It's the other way around. It's the other way around. It is the literary texts that affect the literary models. Okay, because although the models are closely related to the texts, okay, but I don't think any writer would sit down and think that I'm gonna write this based on the cultural model. No, a writer would create a novel or a story or whatever it is, a play based on his objectives. And these objectives may be related to any of the models, but it's never created to please a certain model. It is always to please or to, to attain the objectives of the author. Okay? So it's the other way around, Maria Cristina. Okay, so I hope I've satisfied your question, and Cheryl as well. All right, I like this question. I like this because it allows us to go beyond literature. Okay, so now let's move on to literary standards. So literature, as compared to other or any other forms of writing, possesses distinct qualities that separate it, not separate, because it's a verb, that separate it from the rest. So there are 7 standards that set literature from the rest of the literary texts in the world. Okay. So the first one is universality, especially the classics of literature. By the way, before we start with the first one, we're talking, when it comes to literary standards, we're talking about the ones that are considered classics. We talk about the ones that have broken the glass ceiling. Okay, so they have set the standards of what is a true piece of literature. So the first one is universality. So literature appeals to everyone regardless of culture, race, age, gender, etc. One good example is Harry Potter. So there are millions of Potterheads around the world, and millions of them have grown up with the novels and the movies. And you can see a lot of merchandise, a lot of websites, fandoms of Harry Potter. And that is only one good example of the universality of literature. So regardless of where people are in the world, they have all enjoyed Harry Potter. Now, what makes a piece of literature universal? There are many, but one of them is the theme. And these are 10 of the most common themes in literature. So you have judgment, survival, peace and war. You have love, which is one of the most common. We have heroism, we want people to look up to. We have the fight between good and evil, circle of life, the circle of life. And then we have suffering, like Dear Evan Hansen. And we have deception. This is a mask. The Mask of the Phantom of the Opera. Okay, you should watch the Phantom of the Opera if you haven't watched it yet. And then we have coming of age. Okay, so these are 10 of the most common themes in literature. And the second standard is artistry. It has an aesthetic appeal that goes beyond normal, and it possesses a sense of beauty that is extraordinary. So it goes with everything, the characterization, when it comes to musicals, for example, the characterization, the themes, the attack on the themes, the approach, the costumes, the music, the lyrics, the story itself. So all those things, go together, and they create this artistry that makes a piece of literature standard. Okay, and my favorite example is West Side Story. And this is Tony and this is Maria, and in this scene they are singing Tonight. Tonight, tonight, it all began tonight. I saw you and the world went away. In late 2021, the new version of West Side Story is going to open in theaters, and this time it's directed by Steven Spielberg, so it's gonna be great. This one is the original version, which was released in the 1950s. Okay, so the third standard is intellectual value. Literature stimulates critical thinking. It enriches our mental processes. It makes us intelligent. The explanation is very long. In short, no, in short, the intellectual value of literature is that it makes us intelligent, it makes us smarter, all right? And that there could be no other perfect example than Sherlock Holmes. So, as a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I can really say that this character created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle allowed me to develop my analytical skills, my deduction, my ability to deduce from, from evidences, from clues. All right. So I cannot appreciate this piece of writing enough. I'm just a big fan. And I must say that yes, it has made me smarter. so so that's why I keep watching the Netflix version, because that's the quickest way to get a fix of Sherlock Holmes. But of course, if I have a longer time, I would watch. No, not watch, but I would read the short stories again. So this is highly recommended. So the next one is suggestiveness. So literature should carry many associations that lead beyond the surface meaning. So reading literature goes beyond the words. There are symbols there are nuances, there are meanings, there are messages that go beyond the surface of the page. And this one is related to intellectual value actually. So what makes a book, a story, wonderfully written is when it allows it gives time for suggestiveness. Because why because it recognizes that the readers are intelligent, that the readers are capable of knowing the deeper meaning of the text. So one good example is the Scarlet Letter. So this letter here refers to the word adulteress, because the woman conceived a child from a man who was not her husband. And this was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And if you would consider the time and place in which the story was based on, you would really think that it goes beyond the letter A. So now if people, especially the fans of literature, would think of the letter A, especially in red on the chest, it has a very big impact. It has a deep meaning. All right. So it means more than being considered an adulteress. It means being labeled. It means being ostracized from society. It means being marked for the rest of your lives for one mistake. For one mistake that, in fact, in the present time, is no longer considered as evil as when it was during their time. All right, so it's very deep. It's a very deep story actually. So I would also recommend you to read this one. If not, you can watch the movie. All right. So the next one is spiritual value. So literature elevates the spirit and the soul, and it has the power to motivate and inspire, make us better humans. So this is related to personal growth. And for me, the best example is The Alchemist by Paulo Cuello. It is in this book where I learned about personal legend. And one of the most famous lines there is that if you want something, the universe would conspire for you to achieve it. And this story is about a boy, Santiago, who traveled across North Africa to realize his dream. All right. And it really elevates your soul. It inspires you to go pursue your own dreams. Okay. So I hope you will also read this book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I've read this, I don't know, twice or thrice. Okay. So the next one is permanence. Literature endures across time. So across time, William Shakespeare, for example, is still considered as the best playwright of the English language. So there's a certain timelessness in his works. And one good example is Romeo and Juliet. The story of star-crossed lovers is still something that we can all relate to, even in the 21st century, right? So that's why there is permanence, regardless of time, regardless of when you would tell the story of Romeo and Juliet, there would always be someone, maybe even us, who would be able to relate to it. Okay. So that's why Shakespeare is considered as the best, the greatest writer of the English language, if not the best playwright in the world of all time. Okay. I think he is. I've read Romeo and Juliet and I've watched interpretations of, not adaptations, but, productions of his other plays, such as Hamlet and King Lear, and they're very impressive. And I must say that, yes, even those plays have a certain permanence in them. Okay. The next is style. Literature presents peculiar ways on how man sees life, as evidenced by his ideas, and also style can be found in the way the author would deliver his story. And one great example is the contemporary novel entitled Love, Rosie by Cecilia Ahern. If I'm not mistaken, this is an Irish novelist, Cecilia, and what makes her style distinct is that in the whole book, it's all about exchanges of letters and emails and notes and chat messages, instant messages and all. And yet, she was able to deliver the entire novel through those communication exchanges. And I think that's what makes her one of the most interesting and creative writers of the modern times. And that's no wonder why her novel has been adapted into a movie. You should watch it if you haven't watched it yet. It's really sweet and it will make you fall in love. But of course, you will get frustrated first. Okay? I will not tell you why. Alright? You gotta watch the movie. Alright? So, let's move on to the Q&A. Alright, so the first question is, what's the significance of these literary standards? It is significant because these standards set the bar. What do we consider as literature? What do we consider as the best in literature? Alright, so if you look at, for example, this one, you have the term here, bestseller, major motion picture. How do we consider these? How can we say that they are the bestseller? Because a lot of people read them, right? So there is a universality. Okay, so a lot of people watch the movies. For example, Harry Potter, right? And that even after centuries, people still fall in love with Romeo and Juliet. There is permanence. Okay. So that's how significant literary standards are. So you cannot just say that, for example, if I would write, to be honest, I have written my own play, but I can't say that I have already reached the level of these literary greats. It may be a piece of literature, but in terms of the standards, it is not there yet. Okay, but it is a complete play. What I have written was a complete play, but it's not there yet. It's a good practice. Okay, all right. So with that, what's the implication? It is suggesting that we read novels, poems, pieces of literature that are standard. Okay, so next question is from Grace Pukong. Universality is one of the literary standards in which it means that a literary piece, I think, is what it means, can be shared around the world regardless of the culture, race, and gender. Yes. So the question now is there a possibility that a piece of literature, not literacy, can be banned in one country? If yes, would it still be considered as literary? Yes. And have books been banned in certain countries? Yes. Okay. Why? Because some of their themes were against the culture, were against, let's say, the government of that country. Even Rizal, right? Even Rizal, his Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo were banned by the Catholic Church, right? But were they still literary? Yes. And in fact, his novels are still taught in schools until now, right? Okay. So it has achieved permanence. It has achieved permanence. So yeah, and then the style also of Jose Rizal in writing. So there are many elements of what makes a literary standard has already been achieved by Jose Rizal's novels. Okay. Next question. How will the future educator effectively use the literary standards to apply in real life? Number one, how will you use the literary standards in your life? Number one, be a reader. Be a reader. Read the bestsellers, read the classics so that you will know. You will fully understand what the literary standards are if you would read those books that are considered classics and standards, and the best of the best in their genres. Okay? The bestsellers, for example, the highly recommended books. And so if you've read them as a future educator, especially if you're an English teacher, a literature teacher, you would be able to make the right choices as to what literary texts to teach your students. Okay? You can guide your students very well because you yourselves have the knowledge, you have the experience of reading these literary pieces that have reached the standards. So next question is, permanence is one of the literary standards in which it means that literacy draws out the time factor. So you as a writer, what are the things or contents that you should publish in order to meet this criteria? Well, Jocelyn, permanence is something that cannot be achieved right away. So as a writer, you cannot predict it. What you can do is write the best story the best way that you can, and write the story that you can tell best, right? Don't write a story that you don't know anything about. Okay? And write it the best way that you can, in the best style that you can develop. And who knows, it might gain permanence. Because permanence is not achieved by the author alone. Permanence is achieved when the author is able to connect with the readers. So the readers, time and time again, would keep reading and recommending and teaching the works of this particular writer or writers to the next generation. And that's how an author and his piece of work would gain permanence. Okay? So thanks for that, Jocelyn. I hope that I have answered your question. Next question is from Joyce. Do we really need, I think this is the last question. Yes. Do we really need to include all these 7 literary standards in our writing for it to be considered literary? Why or why not? Well, like I said earlier, I have written my own one-act play. Are they literary? I mean, is it literary? Well, yes, because it has the elements of what is considered a one-act play. It is a drama by virtue of its elements. But is it standard? No. Because number one, it has not gained permanence. It has only been produced once. But okay, let's look at let's go back to the standards. Is it universal? Well, it could be, but then that is something that will be determined by the readers. You must take note that literature is not enough to be published. Okay? It is not enough for a piece of literature to be published. The readers also have a say in what is considered literary standards, okay? Because, if you release a play, for example, and a lot of people can relate to it, then it becomes universal, just like Harry Potter, right? But does it have, like, going back to my play, does it have any of these themes? Yes. There's something about love, okay? And there's also a bit of deception in there, just a little bit. Okay, artistry. Well, artistry is a standard that is reached by, for me, by the most talented and creative in the field. So, although my play may have its own aesthetic appeal, but of course, it doesn't hold a candle against Shakespeare. So, no. In this sense, in this standard, my play has not reached it yet. Okay. Intellectual value, I think so. Yeah, the play that I have written would make you think. It would make you think. But is it comparable to Sherlock Holmes? No. It's a very simple story, actually. Okay. So see, a story can be completed. It can have all the elements, but even with all the elements put together, it may still not reach the standard. That means I still need to write more. Okay? Develop my style or something. So, yeah, the same with suggestiveness and spiritual value. Now, not all stories aim for spiritual value, actually, but as a literature teacher and a reader myself, I must say, if you think long enough and hard enough, you would be able to see the spiritual value in each literary piece. Okay, no matter how funny, there's always like a depth there that may not be obvious right away. Okay, all right, so there you go. And then permanence, and style. So these are standards that are, especially permanence. Remember, it has to be read over and over again across generations. So the readers also have a say in terms of permanence and style, of course, that is based on the author. So if you are an aspiring writer, you need to develop your style. And how do you develop your style? You need to keep on reading. You need to read different types of writers, especially the writers of the genres that you're interested in. And, keep writing. That's the only way to develop your style. Okay? So I hope that I have satisfied the last question. All right? Do we need to include all these? Yes. Okay. In one word, yes. Because that is what makes it a standard. All the elements of all the standards, okay, should be there for one literary piece to be considered as a gold standard in literature. Okay, so all those criteria, okay, not elements, because it's a standard, all the criteria should be met. Okay, so that's it for this video. So thank you so much. These are the credits, the references, and the sources of the images. Okay, so thank you. I really appreciate you watching until the end of the video. So good luck, and yes, expect a quiz based on these topics. So thank you and have a good day.